I think Mimir is inarguably the weirdest and most likable character introduced in all of God of War 4. And I think the most fascinating aspect of his character is how he demonstrates the value of tempering brilliance with compassion. Now I'll explain what I mean. For most of the story of God of War 4, Mimir is a talking severed head hanging from Kratos' hip, telling funny stories, making clever quips, and providing advice and guidance to our heroes. Both practical advice for how to further their physical journey and also personal advice for how to navigate their emotional journey.
Alright, wish me luck. He remembers me. Why you? Oh no, that's not right.
His being a severed head is actually really clever game design. The writers needed a guide character present basically at all times to explain the world and lore to Kratos and Atreus, and also to the players. But from a gameplay perspective, it wasn't practical to have a third character running around with them all the time. Like, would Mimir fight during combat sequences? Would they have to create an entire combat moveset for him? During dramatic emotional scenes between Kratos and Atreus, would Mimir just awkwardly shuffle off to the side? So, their solution? Cut off his head and have Kratos carried around for the whole game. It's brutal, kind of hilarious, and really smart. Anyway, in God of War 4, Mimir's most important role is that of a vehicle for exposition. He introduces Kratos and Atreus to the world, backstory, stories, characters, and rules of Norse mythology, and through them he introduces the player to all that as well. He provides the player with a lot of critical information about the lore, history, and magic of the 9 realms. Information critical to understanding how all this works and why the world is the way it is.
Mimir, you never did tell me why Freya spit in your face.
Well, she blames me in large measure for her present circumstances, and not totally without reason. It all goes back to the long war between the Aesir and Vanir. Prior to that, wars for the Aesir were easily won, but the Vanir had proved their equal and exacted devastating damage. Both sides suffered tremendous losses, and for many of us, quite frankly, war was simply no fun anymore, but a rather senseless waste of precious life. Wouldn't you agree, brother? Precisely. Enough was enough. And at last, Odin's most brilliant advisor became determined to find a more enlightened path. He set about to broker a peace between the gods. It took some convincing, but ultimately Odin was persuaded to marry his deadliest enemy, a certain Vanir goddess, legendary not only for her fertile beauty, but her genius at the very Vanir magic that Odin had long aspired to master.
Freya married Odin? What was in it for her?
It was a sacrifice to protect her people, a selfless act of love. Truly, she deserves better than she got. But of course, there's more to that story.
I think this is a brilliant way to handle exposition in a video game, and to demonstrate just how brilliant and effective it is, I'd like to make a comparison to another game, Death Stranding. Like God of War 4, Death Stranding is also set in a world full of very complicated lore and backstory, and what basically amounts to magic, and just tons of extra information that needs to be communicated to the player in order for them to fully appreciate the events of the story. Figuring out a way to communicate all this extra information to a player is always a challenge. Some games, like BioShock, will provide in-universe audio logs that narrate over gameplay, so you can learn about the world without interrupting the playing of the game.
Silk and down.
The nose looks terrific, Dr. Steinman. Doctor?
You know, looking at it now, I didn't realize how much your face sags. Scalpel?
Excuse me?
Scalpel.
Doctor, she's not booked for a facelift.
Let's just come in here and...
Doctor, stop cutting. Get me the chief of surgery now!
Some open-world games like Red Dead Redemption will make use of travel time between destinations to have characters chat about what's going on. You're going to spend a lot of time riding around the horse regardless, so why not use that time to communicate some information to the player?
So how are things with you and John?
Fine.
Ain't it about time you let it go now?
It was a year, Jose. He ditched us for a goddamn year.
I've spoken to him many times. He knows he did wrong. He just wants to put it behind him.
I'm sure he does. Running off on that kid is one thing, but there's code. He knows that. He ain't Trelawney. Dutch and you pretty much raised him.
So how does Death Stranding solve the problem of how to communicate all this extra information to the player? Well, some of it is communicated through some bizarre but amazing cutscenes, and way more of it is communicated through some very, very long and dry monologues.
You may recall me explaining that these incubators connect BBs via the carbon
network to their still mothers back at HQ. Bridge babies are quite literally bridges between this world and the other side.
Their place is not here with us, nor with the BTs over there. They belong precisely in between, with no greater affinity for one world or the other. But BB-28 here has been leaning further and further towards the world that we live in. Towards you, sir. These guys are my partners.
I'd never manage without your help. Check the delivery terminal upstairs for the details. When you're ready, of course.
And way too much of it is communicated through this codec, where your character receives messages. There's like an entire novel's worth of information about the plot and characters that is locked in what are essentially in-game emails. I'm probably being a little unfair here. I admittedly have not played Death Stranding since it first released, but just for comparison's sake, let's listen to one of Mimir's stories in God of War 4.
Mimir, why did you work for Odin if he's so horrible?
It's my career! And if you mean to make your career as a counsellor to kings, you can't very well rule out petty maniacs. Available positions are scarce enough. My first master was a cruel piece of work as well, but I learned through him the enduring power of wit, which served me well with kings and gods alike. I couldn't have been much older than you when I started. A fairy king's errand boy and unofficial jester. By night, my mates and I had the run of the forest. Good fellows, they called us. Knavish sprites to the last. We'd get up to all manner of mischief, making fools of the local mortals. But as long as our lord was kept amused, we were spared the consequences. Oh. Then one day he was not amused, and I saw fit to move on. Thankfully, the ages and roads travelled since then have turned me from that merry wanderer into the paragon of virtue you see before you today.
Mimir's stories are presented in such a personable and charming way. The character has so much personality and charisma that the player wants to hear these stories. I mean, it's not like this is an amazing story he's telling or anything, but there were so many times while playing God of War 4 that I actually stopped progressing just so I could hear Mimir finish one of his stories. And in doing so, I was learning about Norse mythology, learning about the setting, learning about the lore and the history and the characters. Whenever Mimir started telling one of his stories, I was genuinely like, oh nice, another Mimir story. By comparison, there was never a time in Death Stranding when I was like, oh great, another freaking 10-minute humorless, esoteric, rambling monologue. Or oh great, another email. Again, I'll admit I'm probably being unfair. If you like Death Stranding and its story and how it told its story, you know, that's your truth. Don't let anybody take that away from you. But by packaging God of War 4's extra information in the vehicle of Mimir, by presenting it with personality in character and charisma. The God of War developers managed to make players want to learn about their game's lore. It's really smart writing. Beyond being a mere plot device, Mimir is also a really likable character. Obviously, he's witty, funny, charismatic, and knowledgeable, but what makes him so likable is that he's deeply compassionate and empathetic. He's always nudging Kratos and Atreus towards being better versions of themselves, counseling them against rashness and selfishness, gently criticizing them when they do wrong, gently pushing them towards doing what is right. He's a really, really nice guy who works really, really hard to bring out the best in everyone around him. He's the friend you wish you had. Let's watch this clip of Kratos and Mimir's first meeting to see all this in action.
Ah, the very topic of conversation. A tattooed man traveling with a child.
Boy, check their path. Make sure we're all alone.
But we just saw them leave.
Do as I say.
He doesn't know what you are.
And I would keep it that way. Who are you?
Me? I'm the greatest ambassador to the gods, the giants, and all the creatures of the Nine Realms. I know every corner of these lands, every language spoken, every war waged, every deal struck. They call me Mimir, smartest man alive. And I have the answer to your every question.
Why does the son of Odin hunt us?
Okay, there are a few gaps in my knowledge. But Odin's had me imprisoned here for 109 winters. I'm a clever lad. I can piece it together. Promise. Just give him time.
Nobody there, just like I said.
The boy's mother is dead. She wished her...
She wanted us to spread her ashes on the highest peak in all the realms.
Oh, then you've come to the wrong place, little brother. The highest peak in all the realms is not here in Midgard. It's in Jotunheim, realm of the giants.
No!
That could not be what she meant.
Take a look. This is the last known bridge to Jotunheim in all the realms. See that mountain? Looks like a giant's finger scraping the sky. That's the highest peak in all the realms. No here.
Can't we just take that bridge? We have a Bifrost.
When the giants destroyed all other bridges to their realm, they locked this one up with a secret rune. If it still exists, only a giant would know it.
And all of them left Midgard a long time ago.
True. But today, the winds of fate have kicked up a strange vortex of coincidence. Fact is, there's only one person alive who can get you where you need to go. And luckily for you, my schedule's wide open.
We're going to Jotunheim, right?
It's your best and only move from a tactical standpoint. It's the one place the man who cannot be killed won't follow you.
What do we do?
Yes!
First, you need to cut off my head.
Wait, what?
Odin made sure that no weapon, not even Thor's hammer, could free my body from these bonds. But fortunately, you don't need my body. The trick is, we need to find someone who can reanimate my head using the old magic.
Old magic? There's a witch of the woods. She knows the old ways.
And she'll help. She might do worth a try.
But if she fails, he will be dead.
He tortures me, you know. Every day, brother. Odin himself sees to it personally, and believe me, there is no end to his creativity. Every single day. This isn't living.
Very well.
Oh, I can't watch this.
Brother, in case you can't resurrect me, there's something you need to know. Boy, the longer you wait to tell him his true nature, the more damage you do. He will resent you, and you may lose him forever.
There's much about me I would not have him know.
So you value your privacy more than your son?
I'm going to cut off your head now.
Fair enough.
Here you can see all of Mimir's personality on display. He's witty and clever and cracking funny jokes. He's providing practical information and guidance on how Kratos and Atreus can progress through their adventure, and he's already providing emotional guidance to Kratos, already trying to nudge him toward doing the right thing, which in this case means being honest with his son about his past and his true nature. Mimir has only known Kratos for like 2 minutes, and he's already trying to push Kratos towards being a better father, and he manages to do this without coming off as overbearing or judgmental. So yeah, Mimir is awesome, but for all my praise, in God of War 4 he's also kind of a boring character, because he's just too perfect. Kratos and Atreus are both very flawed characters. They struggle with their flaws. They're trying to grow and change and be better, and they're often failing, often falling down and picking each other up again. That's what makes their journey so narratively compelling, their flaws. Mimir, on the other hand, comes off as basically perfect. He literally calls himself the smartest man in the world, and all the other characters appear to take this boast literally, because he always seems to know the right thing to do, both literally and morally. He never says the wrong thing. As a guide and role model for Kratos and Atreus and a vehicle for exposition, he's perfect. As a complex and nuanced character, not so much. Now, I'm not criticizing the writing here. You can't expect every single side and supporting character in a story to be as fully fleshed out and complicated as the main cast. That's just not how stories work. It's totally fine to have a supporting character who is a basically perfect role model. If done right, and Mimir is definitely done very right, that can be good writing. But in a discussion of Mimir's character, the two-dimensional nature of that character needs to be mentioned. Let's move on to God of War Ragnarok and see how Mimir's character changes there, because there have been some definite improvements to the writing of his character. For most of Ragnarok, Mimir serves a very similar role to the one he played in God of War 4. He's clever and charming, he provides a lot of guidance, both practical and moral. By the start of the game, he has pretty clearly become Kratos' closest friend and confidant, someone Kratos trusts, someone Kratos listens to and whose counsel he values, which is really sweet. That's really not something Kratos has ever had in his life before. In all the games in the series, he's basically been going it alone. He's never really had a friend, never had someone he could share his burdens or worries with. So this is a really gratifying development to see.
What are you thinking, brother?
I am thinking. I want things to be the way they were.
Well, I'd like to climb a tree again. Certain ships have sailed.
I just wish Atreus were not so restless. I care only for his safety.
I know, brother. But holding him too tight won't keep him out of danger. The lad's determined to make a few mistakes of his own. And I hate to say it, I think Tyr might be one of them. I've never seen a man broken so completely.
His pain is fresh. You expect too much.
Aye, perhaps.
However, Mimir doesn't come off quite as perfect in the new game. When the characters journey to Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, we learn of some unpleasant things Mimir has done in the past. Mimir has always been really smart, but that intelligence was not always tempered by compassion and empathy the way it is in the present. In Mimir's past, we can see what can happen when someone chooses to do things the purely logical and smart way, without giving any consideration to compassion. I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship between empathy and rationality here. One of my all-time favorite books is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. In that book, there's this scientist named Felix Honecker. Felix Honecker is the most brilliant scientist of his day, a true genius. His inventions changed the world. The thing is, though, that Felix Honecker doesn't seem to have any compassion or empathy for anyone. He barely even comes off as human. He's like Spock or Data, pure rationality. He never gives any thought to how his inventions might affect other people. He just invents. Ultimately, one of his inventions destroys the entire world, and it's a pretty clear metaphor for the development of nuclear weapons. Felix Honecker is an example of a character whose rationality and brilliance is not tempered by compassion or empathy. Mimir in the past is another such example. So, once upon a time, Mimir was Odin's advisor. It turns out that in that role he did some very bad things. While looking for Tyr, the characters meet this dwarf in a tavern playing this weird instrument. As they're about to leave, the dwarf says, "And while you travel through this realm, maybe you can clean up the head's mess." The mess he's referring to are these magical mining rigs. So in the past, Odin wanted to control Svartalfheim. Mimir convinced him to establish that control through diplomacy instead of conquest. That diplomacy was, the dwarves could work for Odin in these magical mining rigs that Mimir helped devise and build, or Odin could slaughter them. Apparently, Mimir buttered up the language of this deal so it didn't sound so horrific, lied to them, because what it is slavery. Mimir helped Odin enslave the dwarves, helped build these mining rigs so the enslaved dwarves would work in the most efficient way possible, helped soften the language of the conquest so the dwarves would be less likely to resist. Even worse, these mining rigs are poisoning the land, so much so that the dwarves can't grow their own food anymore. They have to rely on Odin for food now, and that means they can never oppose him, never get out from under his tyrannical thumb.
Mimir, were you really the one who had those rigs built?
Odin wanted the dwarves under his control, and, well, I convinced him he could buy their allegiance instead of demanding it outright. A trade agreement of sorts.
If the dwarves agreed to the deal with Asgard, why do they blame you?
I talked them into their own exploitation.
They made their choice.
Work or die is not a choice. I only made it seem so.
How did these rigs come to be?
I had them built to harvest ore for armaments. Essentially harnessing resources that would otherwise go to the dwarves.
You think shutting these things down will help the dwarves become independent?
I don't know, but I have to try something.
Why would the dwarves agree to work for the Aesir in the first place?
That's the heart of it, eh?
You lied to them.
I lied to them.
Surprised the dwarves didn't shut these rigs off themselves.
One or two tried. The Einherjar made examples of them.
They killed the dwarves? And you have convinced them not to?
Aye.
The dwarf survived because of you.
Aye, you're not wrong there, brother. Odin would have wiped out every last dwarf in Svartalfheim. If he couldn't use their skills, no one could.
You speak of your deeds with shame. Do you regret not allowing Odin to kill them?
I don't...
If the dwarves didn't like working for Asgard, couldn't they just quit?
Do what? Their newly built forges poisoned the soil of Svartalfheim. Unable to grow their own food, they had to buy it from Asgard. If they stopped working, they'd be taking food out of their own mouths.
Oh, that's clever. And awful.
It is done.
If you could call so meager a task done. A wee drop out of the Asgardian occupational bucket.
You must live with your deeds, but do not be troubled by them, brother.
Oh? And why not?
You were given an impossible problem. Do not blame yourself for failing to solve it.
I'm sure the dwarves feel differently. This doesn't fix things.
No, but it is a start.
Side note, that's the first time Kratos has ever reciprocated by calling Mimir brother. It's very cute. Mimir is clearly conflicted about all this, but I think Kratos lets him off a bit easy here. Kratos is trying to comfort a friend, but I'm not sure if I agree with what he says. Through Brock and Sindri, we've seen how capable the dwarves can be. If Mimir had set his genius to helping them resist Odin, instead of helping them enslave themselves, they might not have been destroyed, might not have been enslaved. The Vanir and Giants, despite terrible losses, have managed to survive Odin's onslaught. I think the dwarves could have too. So this is really bad. This is a really terrible thing that Mimir was a part of. Ultimately, Odin is the one really responsible. He's the one in charge. And even if Mimir wasn't involved, Odin still would have conquered and enslaved the dwarves. But still, just being a part of this at all, not opposing it in any way he could, makes Mimir look really bad. And this is an interesting moment in the story, because this is essentially the first true wrong thing we've ever heard of Mimir doing. Sure, he negotiated the failed marriage between Freya and Odin, which ended up being a huge disaster for everyone involved, but in that case he was at least trying to do the right thing. With that marriage, he was trying to end a bloody war, trying to create compromise and peace. I think the choice to reveal something this troubling about Mimir's past is a really intentional one by the writers. Before this side quest, Mimir was basically perfect. After this side quest, he feels much more like a flawed, nuanced, and complicated character, which is good writing. In the present, Mimir is a character who's guided by empathy, and because of that, he wants to rectify his past mistakes, to help in any way he can. In pursuit of this, they destroy the mining rigs, therefore helping the dwarves. However, some mistakes are permanent. Some mistakes cannot be made right. Some mistakes cannot be undone, as we see in this next side quest. Mimir committed one more sin in his past that we need to cover. This colossal, incredible aquatic beast is the Lyngbakr. Mimir captured and enslaved this creature to impress Odin, and so that its oil could be harvested and used to fuel Odin's lamps. The oil harvesting process is a violent one, where the creature, while alive and fully conscious, has parts of its body carved away so miners can get to the oil. These instructions for mining the Lyngbakr remind miners to always wear earplugs, presumably so they can drown out the creature's cries of pain, which is pretty morbid. Because of Mimir, this Lyngbakr was enslaved and tortured for probably hundreds of years. Mimir does make it clear that he feels really bad about it. Kratos seems especially disappointed after this one. During the mining rig side quest, Kratos tries to comfort Mimir about his mistakes, but during this one, Kratos does no such thing. He and Mimir have a very interesting exchange, unique among all their interactions through both games. Kratos is more critical of Mimir here than anywhere else in either game.
What is this?
A Lyngbakr. I captured it many years ago.
For Odin?
Yes. I thought it an imaginative and eye-catching way to earn his favor.
It worked?
That it did.
This creature, you enslaved it.
Aye.
But why?
Because I was young and stupid. And I didn't know what it was like to be chained in one place for years at a time, with nothing to occupy your mind but pain. You're angry with me, aren't you, brother?
I remember the feeling of a yoke around my neck. I would not wish it upon another. Why enslave the creature?
Its fat was a good source of oil for Odin's lanterns.
Oil? For lanterns?
Whatever anger you're feeling, whatever loathing toward me, it's nothing to what I've said to myself.
You never spoke of this creature.
Does that surprise you? That an old man would be ashamed of the mistakes he's made?
No.
I'd hoped the creature would be long expired by now. But apparently the Aesir couldn't even be bothered to mercy kill it once it was no longer useful.
We could kill it.
No. Not when we can save it.
You would still save this broken creature?
I know what it is to be imprisoned like this. I can't just leave it.
And if it is beyond saving?
I don't understand. There! You're free! What's going on? Maybe it needs a little encouragement. Can you get me closer to its eye for a face-to-face, brother?
To rectify his mistake, Mimir guides Kratos and Atreus towards freeing the Lyngbakr. However, even after destroying its bonds, the Lyngbakr doesn't flee.
Go on, you great blubbering beast! Shoo! It's not moving. Why is it not moving?
It has grown accustomed to its chains.
But... No, we can fix this. We just need to chase it off and scare it. Something.
There is no making things right. Only better than they were.
It likes the wind blowing on its face. I can feel it.
May you provide some comfort.
That's not enough.
It seldom is.
Its wounds, both physical and psychological, as a result of decades of torture, are too deep. This creature, even if physically free, will never psychologically be free of its time in captivity again. Its wounds will always be a part of it. This is a mistake that Mimir cannot undo. I want to go back to Cat's Cradle and Felix Honecker, because Felix Honecker was a brilliant character, a genius, but he never gave any thought to how his inventions would affect people. Past Mimir seems to have been the same way, creating those mining rigs, capturing the Lyngbakr. Those were amazing feats, something that only a truly brilliant character could have accomplished. But Mimir didn't give any thought to how the things he did would affect others. This is what I mean by brilliance tempered by compassion. Mimir in the present is just as smart as he was in the past, but now his brilliance has been tempered by compassion. In the present, he chooses to do what is smart while also being guided by what is compassionate. There are these hyperlogical, discompassionate characters that get popular every now and then among certain audiences. Think of Spock from Star Trek, the half-human, half-Vulcan who has chosen to cut off all his human emotions to live a life ruled solely by logic. Or Rick from Rick and Morty, who is a total genius who doesn't care what anyone else thinks, but is also a total asshole who just doesn't care about anyone. Sometimes people get attached to these kinds of characters. They say, that's my ideal. We would be so much better off if we could just stop letting our feelings affect our decisions. If we could just stop caring. Let cold facts and logic dictate all our decisions regardless of how it makes anyone feel. I think Mimir's character is an interesting response to that ideal, because Mimir is probably as smart as those characters. Within the world of God of War, Mimir is the smartest character alive, supposedly. He is the Spock or Rick of his world. And yet, unlike them, in the present, his genius is tempered by his compassion. We've seen what kinds of decisions he made in the past when he wasn't compassionate, where he helped enslave the dwarves or helped enslave the Lyngbakr. But in the present, he is as brilliant as he is empathetic, and that allows him to be not just smart, but also wise.
Mimir, I still don't get why you ever wanted to work for Odin.
Back then, I was young enough to still be ambitious. The Aesir gods were as powerful a force as I'd come across, but they clearly lacked for strategy, focus, and sage counsel. All this could I faithfully provide. And so, a stranger from a far-off island found himself with Odin's ear, trusted as he trusted no one but himself. And with that kind of power, laddie, I must confess, there are perks.
Yeah, but he's Odin.
I never claimed to be perfect, laddie, only clever. And often too clever by half.
So what'd you do to get Odin so mad at you?
Well, for a long time my job was to enable Odin, and I was fucking excellent at it. Gradually, as I grew more to care about people and the world, my job became to contain him, to protect him from himself. By serving peace, I served his interests as well, that's the truth. But he saw it as disloyalty. No longer trusting my motives, but not wishing to part with my brain or tongue, he bound me to a tree and adopted a new pastime of casual torture.
Well, I'm glad we came along to cut off your head.
Aye, lad. Lucky break that was.